So there was a bug found yesterday with Ganglia showing a local host down. There is a bug filed on it, but it's been low priority.
I filed that bug a long time ago.
Yeah, I've got a few like that too. It seems to be easy to recreate. I don't know what the problem is. But were there any other monitoring questions? So PMICE, if you're running X on your workstation, log in with X11 forwarding, then you can run PMICE or else go to a remote desktop. Now somebody mentioned going to a remote desktop and you just get the gray hash. That usually means you need to restart XDM to be able to get the actual desktop. Also, I should probably do this now. So let me just pick on George too, no particular reason there. $58.01 for the web browser. So this looks good. This shows that the port is at least activated. That VNC, there's a check config for VNC under XINetD, and that is activated. But I suspect it's also telling me that I don't have multi-users, so right now the password would be root. So if I didn't get this, I'd have to restart XDM if you get just a gray hash. So I'm going to log in. And under, let me just go YAST to, let me go YAST. So remote administration was under network services. I don't think it's picking up my tab key. I suspect it didn't pick up my tab key there. Cuts and pastes are no fun either. The other one, let me do a SAX2. Needed X to do this. That's why I went to the remote desktop. What did it say here? Already done. I guess it's not going to like me today. Just says it's already running. Let me just try a different one to see if I can demo it. There is a VNC viewer for Windows as well.
Yeah, that's what I kept getting. could not
Oh,
use a
let
monitor.
me try and native. It's worked fine yesterday on the other systems too, but
Yeah, the George 1 VNC could get N curses and X terminal, but it couldn't get the other graphics pushed through.
comes up fine on my on my Linux desktop.
But that's Linux.
Yeah, I realize. But in that SAX2, there's a VNC button and then allow access to display using VNC, activate passwords, allow multiple connections. Just try this one last time. I got bit by this, by the way. In SLUS 11, they moved it under control panel, but not under YAST.
If you echo $display, what is it showing?
That's what except a :1 instead of a :2.
Well, I've got a session open on my browser here, but I just have the window open, that's all. I'm not running anything.
Here was I was talking about for a gray display.
Right? Do I need to close my web access to this? I shouldn't have to. It should allow multi-access.
So I restarted XDM. Yeah, I'm not going to pursue this much further. If you've got a remote desktop too as root, that could be part of the problem. Xterm comes up. But this one seemed, oh, yeah, maybe just because you've already got, I don't know.
I would think it should, because you could have multi-user systems.
What will happen if I,
INC works.
oh, that's right, there is nothing.
Yeah.
Now my auto scripts, there's one to enable VNC, remote administration access. That's just the check config for VNC. But then the stuff that SAX2 is doing is in a X11 config file, and my script is not actually setting that up correctly yet. So if I were to re-image, I would have to deal with the remote access capability and NIS. Well,
I'm not sure instructor exists on George 1 admin. It exists on service 0.
host name inside the cluster is service 0, but as far as DNS lookup within the corporate, George 1 is found and mapped to that IP address. When you log in, it is still treated as service 0. Again, there was a cadmin command, -- host name. We haven't been using it because it gets lost every time we discover, and then it gets frustrating to keep redoing it. And the scripts in post-install are basically setting up the environment variable to be the host name, but the host name is not actually known within the cluster by that, only through the house to the public IP address. So again, in lab, you should have been able to get PM ICE up. So here are my two nodes. Let me just run this code. There we can see the CPU's going busy, the network traffic, and this one down here is memory. Most of the memory is free in this scenario. Now this one right here would be for more CPUs if I had more CPUs on the node board. These are the dual core, not the quad core. I'm not sure how they're handling 24 with hyperthreads on and 6 to a core, 6 to a package, 2 packages, and then double that for virtual. Do we know what a hyperthread is really? A hyperthread is basically 2 sets of registers, 2 sets of program counters on chip. They are still sharing the instruction pipes, still sharing the caches, still sharing the functional units. But we can context switch between the 2 hyperthreads and not have to go to memory to save the stuff off. It's all on chip. And with the latest Nihalims, both threads can have their instructions in the pipe at the same time. They can interleave the 2 threads' instructions. By the way, with Intel MPI, it does yields instead of spins and barriers, so you can see the system time going on there. We have 2 types of barrier synchronization, a spin or a yield. NPT does a spin. Intel MPI does a yield. Intel OpenMP also does a yield by default. Now I'm into a spin again, no system time associated. If you were to profile that system time, you see it's all sched yield, whose whole purpose is to give the CPU to somebody else if somebody else is there. Okay. And then this is the Intel MPI benchmark, IMB. It's also integrated now as an MPI test RPM to make it easy to have a integrity check on system. the package will be there automatically, and then you've got something to make sure the cluster's working. I'm also, let's see. Oops. Here's ganglia. I'm just going to look at the last day. Noon. I was looking to see if we could actually see the clone slots that happened last night.
I was looking at that earlier today. I was looking at how long they were down, and it was showing up in ganglia.
Right. So I'm going to go to rack 1 here. Let's see, actually, let's go back. Take a look at the controllers.
And this is on George.
I'm on, oh yeah, you're right, we didn't do it on George. I want George 1.
Yeah, George 1, you can see the bounce where it DHCP'd and redid.
You can see the I/O wait time during that clone slot right there. Even though it says wait CPU, that's an I/O wait counter. So that's about 7 o'clock, it looks like.
That sounds about right, because I did the clone slot first to have a quote-unquote backup before I did any updates to my current.
Yep. That's why I stuck it there was, again, if you lose your disk, you're still in trouble. But you can clone your root once you said, okay, this one's my freeze point, let's clone it off to the other slot. Now that's going to occur for both the admin, the lead, and the services. They all have slots that are going to get cloned. And there's a lot of head movement and I/O going on during that interval. I'm just going to pick a particular node, R1 lead here. So there you can see the I/O wait. Also some dropped data. There are a couple of times in there where there's data missing. And then down here again, I've got details for my idle time I don't care about. System time, that was about 4% system time during that interval. Here was the big one, the I/O wait, about 25–30% I/O wait. And you can see the disk space as it was shuffling around too. And then we should have quotas, the load levels. Now the load levels are counting CPUs that are running, runnable, and waiting on I/O. In SLUS 11, they're also counting waiting on metadata I/O wait. Network traffic, not a whole lot there. Total processes. Where did the quota go? Huh. Oh, I'm on a lead node. I don't have quotas on a lead node. And in lab, you should have been able to find out where that particular link is. Oops. In Ganglia templates, default images, and there's a JPEG in there. A lot of sites want to put their own logo up there. I was going to go and choose a rack 1, choose a node. So I'm looking at an individual compute node now.
It's interesting because I just now noticed that the SGI thing is just upper left, SGI Altix ICE. When I was playing with Ganglia the other day, I inserted the string George 1 Altix ICE.
Yeah.
It upgraded with an RPM and it lost that change?
No, I'm not sure. This is in the database once you've already started.
Okay. Because I did have it yesterday.
Let's see. Okay, where was it? I was close. So in here is a lot of the key stuff in here. I don't think that the that's going to be in. Well, they moved it to me, Ganglia. I don't think it's in there.
But I was looking in.
There it is, right there.
Yeah, and I thought I had.
But then, looking for where the RDS database is. Bar lib, Ganglia. I could have looked in my lab manual as well, but so I thought that some of that information was actually buried into the database itself here.
I don't think I got that deep. I think I was just looking at some of the.
I don't, let's see. It has been bounced. It's been up 15 hours. Well, anyway. In the compute node, what I was looking for was, there's our quota usage. So each of the compute nodes has quota limits on it. That's coming up in the next module. I just want to see what it's looking like up here. Again, we do not see the service node on this, and I'm running on the service node. Memory, looks like a little bit of idle CPU there. I'm just going to zoom down and see. Can't really see, since it's always busy. This is doing a spin instead of a yield. It's on a SGI MPT. So we can't tell how much of that is the barrier spinning and the actual computational work of the fractal generator. But this is a good test to make sure all your X11 and your graphics are working. Let's see. One thing I was going to explain, Kevin, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Okay, we were just waiting for you. One of the things being talked about was the boot process of your nodes. The lead and service nodes all have DHCP PXE boot first in their BIOS, and they should remain that way. The way it's supposed to work is PXE boot first so that we can discover the node without having to go in and change it to be PXE boot. And then if the discover command is not running, the discover command isn't listening for that particular host, the DHCP server is basically off. So I'm not in the middle of a discovery process. The system comes up like the service node, it does a DHCP request, and there will be no response, no IP address given back because DHCP is not listening for that particular node. It's then supposed to roll over to the next boot order, which should be disk. On one of the clusters, occasionally these BMCs have problems. Now, I was trying to describe two problems. One was I couldn't get to the BMC at all. I couldn't ping it, couldn't get power status, C-power, IP MyTool are timing out all the time. That's what I was experiencing earlier in the week on George 3. And when you can't ping the BMC, it's more than likely the Ethernet switch that you're plugged into. So every BMC is plugged into a switch. If that switch has problems, a hung port or whatever, then you're not going to be able to get to that BMC to do anything. So the other day I came in through the serial port. My DMZ server has USB to DB9 connectors plugged into the 4 IRUs CMCs. And then I went in there and did a power space off and the power space on, or I also can do an init 6 and reboot the cluster, or reboot that CMC. Power on, power off is just going to recycle the switches that are attached to the CMC, whereas the init 6 is going to actually reboot everything. Again, there was a sensor command available there as well. Let me log out of here. I'm going to go to R1 lead. SSH to I0C. Password was root. And then the sensor command, showing me all the power status, and we wanted to see the stuff up here. So power space off, power space on, reset that stuff, and init 6 will actually reboot this CMC. So if I can't get to the BMC at all, I suspect the switch in the CMC. But then today we could get to the CMC. We were able to see the system start to boot, but it never rolled over from PXE boot to disk boot. And for that, I power cycled by unplugging the service node and plugging it back in. For whatever reason, my BMCs stick every now and then. And in that case, it's sitting there on PXE boot, but it never rolls on to the next one. In fact, if you sniff the network, I don't think it's even putting a PXE boot, a DHCP request out when it's in bad shape. So don't forget when you're doing discover and stuff that every BMC is plugged into a CMC switch, and there could be problems there. Again, you can log into the serial port underneath, you can log in. I don't want to actually reboot this thing through the R1 lead. I'd rather come in through the serial port because then I'd see everything. And anyway, the last resort was just pulling plug and plugging it back in. And again, this is all BMCs because they're sharing the same port as SSH normal network TCP connections. So also for Kevin's benefit, we did have a problem with certificates. There was a bug in 1.10, and we had to touch a file in the ITSI SSL directory to be able to generate a certificate. And there is a typo in the workbook. You do not want to pipe the output of sync repo updates into a T to save the output. Yesterday what I did was I did an SSH to localhost, pipe that output into T, into a file, and then when I was SSH'd, I was under a different shell. And then when I type in sync repo updates, it prompts me for support folio login and password. So if you just piped it, it'll be sitting there. You never see the output. So I was actually surprised that I still hadn't fixed that in the workbook because I was sure I had. So we had some BMC problems, certificate problems. Also, while you've been working, I have put in a kernel that supports hardware counters. So I'm going to do a uname-a, and I put in, this is a kernel that came down from support folio. It's in root as a KO tarball. I went to support folio, downloads, and searched for perfmon. Had to go, it's a 2008 download, so I had to go back more than 6 months to be able to find it. And now I've also got perf suite in the SW, and there's a module file for it. So let me just try it here, module load perf suite. Oops, came in through the desktop. Since I'm coming in through the desktop, it doesn't know module. Okay, so pfmon ls, and we are able to get to hardware counters now. pfmon-l, and see all the individual hardware counters that are there.
So that is in,
And let's see.
in 60.
What's the question?
When you did a uname -a, I thought the kernel was 2.6.16.46-0, and some of the kernel updates from SMT were trying to use 2.16.60.
60, yep, that's correct. It is an older kernel.
Okay.
But I needed it for next week for the PS run and profiling.
Kernel. Make sure our menu list is appropriate.
And I was discussing before we started that I should file an RFE for them to spin a /10 SP3 version of it. It is, in terms of release level and everything for 2, that's a good one. It's got all the patches in it. I had to press for that. But they don't have one for the /10 SP3 kernel. Again, once you're in 11, it's not an SGI kernel anymore. It's a SLES feature. And x86 and Titanium are handled differently in SLES 11 and SLES 11 SP1. Again, in SLES 11, it's a Novell solution. In SLES 11 SP1, it's Linux community solution. But pappy_avail, showing me the pappies are not hardware specific. So you could have, we're actually not seeing them here. This, for example, is the native hardware counter event. But that could be spelled differently depending on whether you're going from, for example, McKinley, Madison, Montecito, they all spell it different. Going to x86, they spell it different. So PAPI allows me to have a generic spelling for it, and then it figures out the actual native hardware event for that sort of thing. Now, module load, Intel, actually let me see if Intel 11 is there. I did load the Intel 11 compilers for us overnight too. So now I can do an I4-03-0 code 203 code 2.f. Oops. I'm going to do a ps run -c for the configuration file that I want. I'm going to use just a normal clock timer, but that's basically the experiment type, and then code 203. I'm kind of glad that we're finally integrating PAPI and Perf Suite. One of the things I hate is going to a site and teaching them a proprietary package that only runs on SGI equipment. Perf Suite will run on Crays, IBM's, Titanium, x86, variety of platforms. And it's a lot more generic. So when that thing was done, it left an XML file behind. So now I can do a PS process on that. And in this case, it is as expected. The number one line is this routine clint. Now I actually should have compiled it with symbol tables too. Let me do it just one more. Oh, this is an interesting for me too. Intel's new memory copy. People have been optimizing memcopy. I've been checking with engineering. They are still not going to use the global reference unit, the block transfer engine in ultraviolet. They're not going to use it for memcopy, for memory-to-memory copy. But I do believe that SGI's MPT will be using the GRU for their fast B copy, which is memory-to-memory copies. So now let me run this again. So this is the reason I went to that particular kernel. Now the kernel that you loaded originally came out of the SGI dev tree and should have been working, but it didn't. So I had to go back to a kernel that I know did work for next week. Let's see. And now we're actually down to line numbers here. So again, that new Intel new mem copy from the Intel 11 compiler is coming up rather big, whereas it used to not be that high. And then a couple of key lines where we're spending time at. The other experiment that can be done, for those that knew IRIX, Perfex. So this is multiplexing 26 or so of these counters to give you a basically a summary. So now we're able to look at 26 hardware events and see how many times that sort of thing happened, how many cache misses, how many floating point operations, how many false cache sharing where we had to modify cache lines, particularly the exclusive access to a shared cache line, and then some derived events. So this is all from NCSA Perf Suite. Internally, Daniel Thomas is maintaining the a tarball, and it's available on our /SW mount points and stuff. Does anybody have any questions?
Not at the moment.
So I'm just kind of summarizing a couple of the other things from yesterday. Let me, well, that was the reason for the kernel change on you. And when I made changes to the image, I had to do the cinstallman refresh BitTorrent to make sure the tarballs that were being presented on Discovery were correct, or in this case on push-rack. Then I had to shut down the compute nodes and then do the cimage push-rack, and then use cimage set to specify the image and the kernel that I want to boot from. We cannot do a push-rack to nodes that are up and running. Can't be changing a root underneath them. Then after that cimage push-rack was done and I set the kernel properly, cimage --list nodes to show what they were going to boot on. Then I booted them with cpower, and then I checked with cexec df to see what they mounted. So df will show you the image that got mounted for root, show you the current root. Then I did a cexec uname a to make sure they all got the kernel that I wanted. Again, on the service nodes, it does not support multiple kernels, so you have to edit your elilo grub, your grub menu.list to be the proper kernel. So I push these into the images and then push them out.
I ran the installman update images this morning, and I got a menu.list that has the newer kernel in it.
You got what from it?
This morning, I
Yeah.
ran the installman update image
Right.
and update node.
Yeah.
My menu.list is showing the newer kernel, not the older one that has the tools.
Correct. I expect that.
Edit menu.list.
Yep. Also, everyone pay close attention. Strongly advise you to check your menu.list before you reboot. They're often not properly managed, even in normal SLES. The last thing you want to be is at grub and not know how your kernel is spelled, what the rev level is, or anything like that. So always, after an update or after a kernel change, always sanity check and even have a backup of your grub menu.list. A lot of times in these classes, they come up and they're still on the old kernel, but I'm just saying that there's no guarantee. Also, that clone dash slot,
Yeah.
once it starts, you can't stop it. Took a little over an hour, we were hearing.
Yeah.
Originally, I was able to break out of it, but then it left all these dangling mount points across the cluster that would be impossible to clean up. So when it is done, you kind of want to do a cexec df or something. You want to check to make sure your service and your lead nodes don't have all these extra slots that are mounted to do the copies.
Okay.
So once it starts, they don't want you to break out, or you'll end up having mounts all over the place, for the slots that are copying from and to.
Okay, I don't think I broke out of it. I think I just let it run.
I don't think you can break out of it. Originally you could, and then I messed up a few systems, and they agreed to not allow somebody to break out, because otherwise you could have, 10 racks all with mount points all over the place that are hard to clean up. Can anybody think of anything else from yesterday?
Or just think.
So I do want to bang on the system and have a node failure after break here.
Will we get a chance to make our system coherent before you break it? For example, I have to change all of my menu.list files.
I'm not going to step on yours. I'm just going to step on George, the first one. And there is no real lab for this piece. There's written down steps in the workbook on how to do things, but it's not a structured lab. It's more notes. And again, I know that Connie had problems getting these keystrokes through. Maybe with a Linux or X11, if you're running Xming, Hummingbird, or Cygwin or something, you'd be able to get an X term that will pass them.
Yeah, and I've had trouble from XT as well getting the control sequence.
Yeah. What about Kevin and Megan?
Yeah, I had trouble getting the control sequence.
Yeah. Kevin, how about you? Did you try?
No, I didn't get there.
So it's important to me that you're able to do that. Now, the field actually wrote a script to save the fancy keystrokes. So let me go through that in a little bit. And then disabling a node takes it offline. And then things like cpower and cexec do not consider part of the cluster, but I can still do a cexec explicitly to the node. It's just not considered part of the cluster list. And cpower would not power cycle it unless I use cpower, the particular node name that I made offline. So that allows me to do maintenance and just keep it out. But again, PBS also has to say, I don't want this node to be scheduled for PBS, so you got to mark the state down. And then re-enable the node and get the node back online here. And then with QManager, get the state back up. So in cadmin, again, there was things to change the boot order. Again, our normal boot order is to boot the service node first, then the lead, then the computes. And I did have a problem for a while on Connie's. The service node was down, which was the NIS master. And then everything that you did to the lead node was complaining about NIS domain not being found. Set and delete IPs and show IPs so that you have the ability to force them. And this is the one we mentioned but haven't used much. Set host name and show host name will actually change the host name. You do not want to change the host name via YAST on your service nodes. You use it here so it's changed within the database and throughout the cluster. You got to be careful here too. ITSI host files are built on boot. You go in and stick something in ITSI host, it'll be gone. It gets reconstructed every time you boot the system. And then the cluster domain, most of the clusters ship out of manufacturing with ice.sgi.com or just ice, and you'd want to go in and change it to your customer one. And you're also going to change your admin DNS pointer, house forwarding. So, again, logging into SMT, the lab probably doesn't have it, but there is a SMT command. Just type in SMT. Let me do this. Let me just go do this. So I'm on the admin node. If I type in SMT, it gives me all the syntax. So I can do an SMT catalogs. And then showing all the stuff that I'm registered for, the channel, so to speak. And there is an SMT, sync your mirrors, list your products, list your registrations. I was going to do a report. And in there it's telling me a little bit about what my ID was on the Novell website. That's the login for my particular machine when I registered. And it's got information about up here about the activation code, what's being used, when the subscription expires. And a lot of these we're not using anymore. they've expired. In fact, everyone here looks like it's expired. Oh, here we are. Here's the newer ones. Yep. And this should have been the activation code we used, I think, when we registered the system. Again, that came off the Novell website for SGI-support. And in YAST, once registration was successful, our installation source, notice there's that login. Notice that we now have the SLES 10 updates. I'm just going to hit edit, and there's our login name for Novell and where it's going on that particular server for its updates and stuff. And all that was done on successful registration. So I forget who it was that, I think Connie wasn't sure if she got registered. If it looked registered there, then the next one was YAST. And network services, SMT configuration. And again, this is what came off the website for SGI. And then I'm just going to cancel out of this. It's the ODAPW for those passwords. Let me go back to the workbook.
I noticed the registration name that you were showing there was George1-admin, and yet when you went to the Novell page, George1-admin was X'd out, but George1 was active with the correct date and time.
I'd have to look, again, the name that was used on the website is the name I put in. Let me, so page 838, 839 of the SM. This is where we put in the activation code. You tab to that line, hit enter, and then it's going to say enter your text. So what I'm saying is that this is the name that they used on the Novell website, whatever was typed in there. Now whether that was propagated to the screen that you saw, I don't know. So you were looking at an SMT screen. Here's where we got stuck where, no, this one was okay. So I sample SMT catalogs, and I went off to the system information. This is what we were looking at earlier, last time that they checked in. Make sure that it was activated and allowed for updates. Went off to actually look at an individual host. And then we see the updates there. So SMT, this was where we got stuck. And it, in this case, is giving me this. And maybe I just got this screen and never went any further for a screenshot. But the next one brings me to CA, and then I tab to change. And in there, there's change default or something like that to set the passwords. But I don't have a screenshot of that. So that was where we got stuck. So we had to have the tempo password, and then it goes to update.sgi.com first. Now you will see 404s in a normal situation too. They're trying to clean up those things. There's a PV on that. And again, we don't want to pipe it, or we're not going to get the prompt for this portfolio account and password. Again, it's downloading everything. It's not doing a delta or a diff. It's loading the entire base less, 4 gig ISO. And it is replacing what's in TFTP boot. So what was there actually gets moved out of the way. That's why you don't want to put anything in TFTP boot, SGI, or TFTP boot distro. So this is where we were leaving off. We had to get registered, set up the SMT, and then run the sync repo updates. That's where people left off. Now that's just updating the repository that's in TFTP boot. So to push those changes now, you're going to use cInstallMan and update the admin node, update its image, or update the images that are on the admin node, update the lead node, update the service nodes, do a clean all, and repeat for any of your custom images. And then you're going to have to push rack. I would probably also, if you've got this page or making notes, I think we probably need to do a refresh BT, a cInstallMan refresh BitTorrent to make sure that our tarballs that we're going to push are the latest. Now the stuff that's in post-install per host customization runs when you're imaging. But if you make any changes to the image itself, then that refresh BT is needed. I think that pretty much covers a review of anything I can think of right now. I'll open any other questions. And again, Kevin, I don't know if you were online yet, but we can use these systems end of tomorrow. I want Sunday and Monday to make sure they're working for class next week. It starts Tuesday. Okay. And they can be registered or reserved when there's not a class as well.
So what time on Sunday?
Well, we can arrange it. Send me email or whatever. I'll check. I just want Sunday and Monday to make sure it's stable. Why don't we take a little break here, come back at it's about 20 minutes. Let's come back at 1:30.
Okay.
And do the last module here.
Okay.
So we'll see you in about 18 minutes.
Okay.
So I should be changing all my menu lists back to the 46 kernel.
I wouldn't worry about that. I can take care of that when you're there too. But
Okay.
I was just answering the question as to why the kernel changed.
I'm sorry?
I was just answering the question of why the kernel had changed.
Yeah. Because I was doing some of the cInstallMan updates and stuff this morning, and I think part of the update was to get the newer kernel revision number.
Yeah, that's right.
So to use the tools you want, I need to edit and go back to the older one. But I did save my menu list file off to a copy.
We're gonna start up in 5 minutes.
Okay.
We'll start up in a minute. Kevin, are you back yet? Kevin, you back? Connie, are you back? Give them another minute or two. Who just joined?
Connie?
Okay. Kevin, are you back?
Sounds like a Verizon ad. Hear me now.
One more minute and we'll start. I appreciate your all patience with WebEx delivery of this class. This is the first time I've done it, or anybody's done it, without being in the room to help you. A little harder to manage the clock and to help you in this form, but I appreciate you putting in extra effort.
Actually, I thought it was a pretty good forum. You were very responsive on the email questions, so the fact that, you know, we could learn in place, I think is a nice concept.
Sure. I'd rather learn from doing. I'm trying to make the slides as quick as possible. Even if I do a demo, it doesn't sink in until you hit it.
And it fails on me.
And the hard part is when you get stuck or get frustrated, BMC sticking, things like that, and not being in the room to judge, you know, facial expressions or knowing if you're got a question.
Yeah, I was getting really stuck on entering that SUSE dev thing in the YAS last night, and I was thinking, if I can't enter the user ID for the subscription update, then my subscription update just ends right there.
Yeah, I've gotten stuck in W3M2 where I didn't hit enter first to enter text and then jumped off to some other link that I couldn't get back to.
I found that the arrow keys were very good for manipulating in there. I could usually do my keyboard mapping issue, and it would take me totally somewhere else, and I could usually use the arrow keys to navigate back.
But I think that's last night when you described it, it sounded like where I get stuck too, so I just quickly did it myself. But again, after a week or two, you could reserve one of these machines and try it from scratch and see how much you can do without the help. And the hard part is the customizing that is not integrated into Tempo, like NIS and stuff.
Right. Well, I am a new SGI hire working at ARL at Aberdeen, and they have an extremely strict set of rules for what versions and what things may or may not be run.
Oh, yeah.
I have to learn what their rules are and adopt to their rule set and methodology.
We have this whole technology insertion project, TI9.
Yes.
It includes the Wright-Patterson, ARL, ERDC, and Vicksburg. They're all kind of a coalition under the same contract, so to speak, and have basically the same rules. So at ARL, I'm not allowed to put my laptop on their network and things like that.
Yeah, you are not even allowed to download any software that is not from one of their pre-supplied repositories that has been okayed, that has been cleared.
Yep.
I mean, I couldn't even go out to SLES and download a new RPM. That is not permitted under the ARL rules.
Yeah.
So they have to say it has to be vetted and tested somewhere else, and then ARL people get it from that somewhere else site.
Yep. Did I hear Kevin come back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So we were just talking, seeing if there are any other questions or issues. Did you have anything?
No, it's just that I'm behind.
Well, again, it's all hands-on practice, and you got till Sunday to play with it, and then we can rearrange something after next week, too.
Okay, real good.
These clusters, and there are two that can be used right away inside the SGI firewall, but I put us all on the same cluster so that but the lab manual does talk about IP address and stuff for the Sunny cluster. We've got 2 of them in Fremont. And again, this week was recorded. I'd like to actually cut out the dead spaces and stuff like that and try to trim it down better on a per module basis. But to me, really, the learning is seeing how far you can go without help. And we all make mistakes. You've seen me make typos and things like that too. So if I can move on.
Mm-hmm.
Again, follow up on email as needed. And the last module here is on troubleshooting. The only real lab is to configure embedded support partner or ESP. The rest of the workbook are really notes of mine. I've never put it into a formal student lab. It's more something that are notes for me to be able to create a panic or a dump, things of that sort. So I'm going to walk through the module and then go live with the demo and try to hang some nodes, have an application running, and crash it and see what happens. Also, Kevin, you had some interest in PBS. That is something we can talk about on the side, but there just wasn't time this week, or there never is time during the week for PBS. So we've installed it, but the actual use and configuration was automated.
My site has actually arranged for me to take a PBS class in Troy, Michigan, starting on Monday. I leave airport here on Sunday afternoon. So
Sure.
I'll be doing PBS next week.
Yeah, that's from the vendor.
Yeah, Altair.
So anyways, moving on. Again, don't be afraid to stop me with questions or email me with questions. Inventory of the system. Tempo info gather. And I did have a couple of problems in the past day with InfiniBand. Primarily as I switched kernels, I may not have had all the kernel modules loaded correctly. So IVT was actually misleading in several cases for me as a verification tool. It's really doing a delta between 2 snapshots. But Tempo Info Gather, also known as SysInfo Gather, used to be called NetGather, basically does a collection of firmware levels, OS levels, network files, things like that. Also tell about dumps, bar log messages, things of that sort. The call center will usually ask for a Tempo Info Gather type of report. And Platform Manage and the IO, SGI Console, Management Console also had the same script concept with a different name. It used to be called IO Info Gather, but who knows what they're calling it now. So IVT's handy. DB dump I use basically to keep track of my MAC address, my IP address, and my host name. And then the MySQL, some people will go into the MySQL stuff. Engineering prefers you not go into this database itself, even though you now know where the password is, and if you know SQL, people will go in and hack around. Key thing in the lab here is configuring embedded support partner. Then understanding all the different bar log messages. Imagine having 50,000 nodes, 50,000 hosts, and a couple aren't working right. You gotta be careful about stale NFS handles. Some sites have heartbeats, so automatically do a mount-A. All your serial console messages, including panic messages or the traceback, are in bar log consoles or on the lead node in bar log consoles. And again, we can get to the lead node with an auto mount. Get a traceback, get a dump, and basically use the crash command. Now the hard part with the latest kdump kexec is your symbol tables are not in the base distribution. There is a package known as debug info. You got to find the proper debug info for your kernel. It's not integrated in the repository. And also being able to talk about project quotas that I was trying to refer to earlier. That's an important subject here. So inventorying, again, Tempo Info Gather is the key one. We got IVT, DB dump, ESP, cadmin -- version. I got some sort of format problem there, but -- version, also catting the ITSI asterisk RHEL asterisk. SPIDEN is basically gone. We're using YUM now, not YUP. And zippers is /11. So I'm not sure that I even want those tools listed as inventory anymore. Key thing is ESP, Embedded Support Partner. It's been around for a long time, push on Linux. It's meant to be proactive to problems and automated support. So basically it's watching your system, and if alarm goes off, ESP will see the alarm and then take action such as setting off a pager. ESP is monitoring bar log messages, any sort of kernel events it's keeping track of. It's monitoring PCP's alarms and PMIE. If a file system fills up or is approaching quotas, an alarm will go off. Again, the alarm is basically writing into bar log messages. Any sort of configuration changes, the module boards being shuffled around, serial numbers changing, or package changes too, RPM QA -- last are being tracked. Availability statistics for how long it was up, how long it was down, controlled shutdowns, uncontrolled shutdowns. And lastly, environmental, temperatures, fan speeds, voltages. So it's watching all these different things. Now, the environmental is also coming in from PCP. If you watch your var log messages, you're going to be able to see power downs, power ups, all kinds of things that are in the var log messages. So 9.6 is just showing that the system's out there running. We get some sort of error, so it goes off to SGI with email. There's a ESP notify command, and then SGI parses the notification message on the subject matter, checks the database, validates that the event is true. We'll go off to an SGI knowledge database and email that information back to you. Like if a file system is fulfilling, it'll give you the standard text, find your big files and remove them. Also, if you're on a warranty or long-term support contract, it will log a call, put it into the clarified database. That will queue up to the call center, and then somebody can actually be calling you before you know that you've got a problem. So we do an automated software message of the day type of thing for that typical problem, and if you've got support enabled, logging the call and having somebody call you back. 9.7 is just trying to show the layers in ESP. We've got RAID monitoring tools. We've got syslog messages. We've got an event mon D that's taking all these events from the event manager, the availmon, and syslog, and then dumping them into a database here. Utilities, ESP notify, configured actually who do we notify in an error. ESP call to open up a call to the call center. There is a user interface for web interface. There's also an ESP config command. Now, there was a link to an ESP quick reference card when you got into the class. ESP config is the command line to configure things. ESP report generates reports. ESP notify is what will send me email back, and I can also manage the logs and archive them. So bottom line, 9-9, it's probably on, but check config ESP on, then service ESP start. What's key though is an ESP config -create admin. Bottom of the slide, the default is login as administrator, the password is partner. Then you're going to enable IPs for local host, but also I don't want to have to log into the system. I want my laptop IP to be accepted. So I can also enable ESP to accept things from the IP address that I'm sitting at. Then I do a Firefox and point to that particular host, and port 5554 is what it's listing on. I'll do that in a few minutes. So this is what the front web login might look like. Again, you've got your host name up here. You click login, and it's going to be administrator with a partner as a password. Don't forget it's port 5554. So once I've logged in, it's just giving me the system name. Now ESP is tied to every host in the cluster, and they're all sending information to the admin node. So all the other nodes are what are known as system group manager clients. And the admin node is what is merging all of the ESP information into one log and one report. Also note the serial numbers in here. So SGM, monitor multiple systems, all nodes in the cluster providing event tracking, RPM changes, availability for up and down, notification on alarms, and reporting for groups of systems. And there's a command called SGM admin to configure this. It's all done by Discover on boot. No license is required. So then when I go into ESP, I've got these tiled menus: administration, environment, configuration, reports, and an online log. And for each of these main menus, there is a sub-menu. So ESP admin has customer profile, network permissions, user permissions, archiving, and we were just talking about network permissions so that my laptop can connect in. So as soon as I went to customer profile, it then asked, well, which one do you want to be connected to? You pick the admin node, and then you're into the customer profile one, so you can fill it in with your abstract name. Then I went to set environment, and it gave me the node choices again. I picked the George-admin, and then once I'm in there on set environment global config, here's where you can enable and disable different types of events. Now I still have a bug on shutdown reason being enabled. That's still not working, or it hasn't been. Under configuration then, it has two tiled menus. So we've got configuration events, and then we've got profiles, add, update, delete, subscribe. So in here you can define what current profiles or additional profiles, additional types of events that you want to track. And I actually went into an ESP event report. So here I've gone to report events and kernel messages, and then I can get a report out. And kernel messages is varlog messages. Also went into reports, hardware inventory. Here we get part numbers and things of that sort. There's an ESP report command, so here I'm doing a summary. And that will basically give me a summary of the system. And then the availability report telling me how long I was down, how long I was up, that sort of information. Now adding a new event, I went into configuration events, add, and then I want to add a new event to a new class and a new profile. Add something completely new. So I went in and did this current event profiles available. Looks like they're all already in action here. There's nothing to add. Also, let's see, configuration events, load profile. So here we've got information about the hardware and stuff. And configuration events, update. So here we've got a fan failure that has occurred. So events are handled by the SGM server, the admin node, results in email to root on the admin node. All nodes have root forwarded to the admin node. And then this was an example of something that email might be like, where the host and then tempo giving me basically memory error is what it looks like here. No, fan failure. Fan was low fan speed. Serial consoles, again, are varlog consoles, or on the lead nodes, again, /net has nothing underneath it until it's auto-mounted. but you can do net, R1 lead, bar log consoles, and look at things. As anything that's going to the serial console. So this was the messy part now, being able to get a sysrq request. So control ECL1, whatever the command is. It says within 5 seconds, but really for me it seems more like a second. And L8 will change your log level, T will get a traceback, M will get the mem info, C will get a dump. And the other way of triggering it, like echoing a C in there, will create a crash. Or echoing a T would get a traceback. Next is dumps, supported since Temple 1.2, so there are several packages, kexec tools, kdump, crash, and again the debug info is what's off on a separate website. It's not integrated into SLES. A couple of grub parameters have to be changed, configure itsy sysconfig kdump, and again a dump can be invoked by a panic. By the way, right now kdump kexec is not working on ultraviolet. You can also get a dump through a sysrq or get it through KDB and do a SR space C. 930 is just showing what itsy sysconfig dump would look like.
Hey,
Yeah.
the using the control characters to cause a dump, will that work on a hung system?
Yes.
Okay.
If the BMC has got problems, it's not going to do anything. But as long as you can get to the console, you don't have to actually, you hit return, nothing happens, it's hung, but you can still get one. I'm going to try to do that. But if the BMC isn't talking, then you're stuck. If that CMC network went down.
Okay.
Okay, so anyways, getting a dump, system's running along, you configure your crash dump parameters, which loading ProPack does automatically. There's a script called SGI ProPack configuration that does that. Then we initiate a dump by a panic, an oops, user request. Now this new kdump kexec actually switches to a second kernel. The thinking being I don't want to dump with my current kernel because I don't trust it. So we jump off to another kernel and you'll actually see a second reboot before you get a dump. Then after that second reboot, kdump saves the image to the lead node. We reboot and build our crash file, and then reboot system with normal kernel. Then finally investigate the dump. So I did do this yesterday to get you started, but 932 is kind of showing where we're seeing an SSH. It's making a directory. So var log dumps on the lead node, and then node name, and then date. And then it rsyncs it off there. So, have to watch this. var log dump for the service lead admin nodes, or for the compute nodes, is host name var log dumps with an S. Now, you can either look at a system live or look at a dump, but the command to do it is now called crash, not lcrash. Lcrash is now obsolete. Ultraviolet is using crash as well. The key thing is you got to find the debug info that matches your kernel. The admin guide gives a URL where you can go off and do things. Internally, we have SLES mirrors, and you can find debug info directories for everything there as well. So crash can look at the live kernel, displays information about what led up to a crash, reads data in the dumps and live, generate a report. Crash is not part of the compute image by default. I think I had you add it. So to use crash, I have to have a unzipped VM Linux. So I copied it into the root, unzipped it, and then I ran crash, the debug info name, the kernel name, and the debug info name, and then either the VM core for the live system or the core dump name that I'm trying to look at. And there's a help there for crash. It is different than the lcrash. Some of the things are a little bit nicer. So I got sys to tell me what kernel rev level I'm running, how long it's been up and stuff. And then BT for your backtrace. This happens to be a backtrace for a sysrq to get a dump. This should match what I did yesterday. And then PS to print the process table. You don't need the task table entry address anymore, just the PID. So then you can do a task PID, and it'll print out all the structures in the task table. So 941 is just trying to show you the L crash versus crash comparison. Now, I warned you about SSH problems. First of all, in order for a user to log into the compute nodes on a cluster, they have to have their home directory mounted so that .ssh with all the RS keys are there. So NFS has to be working, and they also have to have user authentication on that node, either by file, NIS, or LDAP. So check to make sure that authentication is up and the networks that it uses are up. Again, I removed my .ssh and logged out and logged back in to recreate it. There is it's SSH config and SSH_config. This is where most of what platform puts their data in, is in the system one, not in the users.ssh. So you should have something like wildcard host, no strict host key checking. If I accidentally removed or messed up a roots.ssh, then there is a repair SSH root key script to redo those. So getting core dumps is on by default. This is application core dumps, and they are off by default. So you got an unlimited core, and again, not enabled for computes. So lastly, we do have quotas. Now, it talks about a hang a node. That's not true anymore. That 2.16.54 kernel that I was trying to use, that one has it fixed. But var, ITSI, and root all have a XFS disk quota limit on them of 1 gig in space. And then there's a projects file that maps each node name or each file system to a particular project. So every node gets their own quotas. The XFS quota, quota-P, can print out the quotas for that particular project ID, or we can get the project ID for a file from lsproj. Have to be careful when you fill up root. You may hang it, or you just may have a slow responding system. But when you reboot, the quota limit is bumped up a little bit, but you're still going to have problems on boot. Dump space is not part of the quota. Again, we're just trying to set the images CM info file here so we can say whether we want a K-dump, what the quota is, and what the node type is. In particular, we're looking at the quota. There's my 1 gig. So I did a head on projects, and the first thing is the project number, 1, and then the path. Then I did an XFS quota on project 1, and we can see where it got mounted, the number of blocks, the quota, and the limit. And if I had exceeded the quota, I would have had a warning going on. So then the hard part is finding what file cost the quota limit exceeded. So I went to the lead node, go into varlib SGI per host, image name, node name, and then start looking around. I can find a file, and with XFS_IL, look at the file, get its project ID, set it to nothing, quit, and then quota-P actually showing what the quota limit was. Uh, 946, just a script that I wrote to basically go down all 64 nodes in a rack to figure out which ones are setting off quota limit exceeded. And again, Gangly is providing that information now. I also have a traceback here. In this case, this was actually an NFS hang. We're sitting here trying to write pages off to NFS and stuck in an NFS wait on write congestion. And that's it. So I've gone to George, and also let me check ganglia. I'm going to get fresh data. And Megan has seen where there was a host down, which wasn't really there. This system isn't showing that. I can also see when I actually fired off this Mandelbrot generator and the fact that it's running.
I had the same situation where it kept saying I had a host down, but it was a ghost host.
Yeah. And again, there is a PV on that. It's just sitting there, but
If you look, it thinks that localhost is the one that's down.
so I am running something here. Notice that I've got a, looks like it's finished now. Got memory use going on in that particular node. I'm running something here now. I'm filling up a quota and looking for it right now. And it doesn't look good. It's not giving me anything about individual file system space right now, nor any quota information. I'm trying to hang the node. The newer kernel is pretty good at keeping me from doing this.
Newer kernel you're referring to is the 46 one or the 60 one?
Both. The vanilla Celeste 10 isn't very good. I can't remember the number on it, but the 46 has all the patches that I want
Okay.
and newer. With a vanilla Celeste 10 SP2, there's an out-of-memory hang, there's a NFS hang on quota limit exceeded, and it also is not flushing dirty data by age. And that SGI dev kernel that I was putting in has the fixes for that. So right now, I can't even get to that particular node, R1I0N0. But my application still seems to be running.
I just lost network connectivity to SGI through VNC, so I don't know, maybe we got a network down.
Well, I'm deliberately creating a quota limit exceeded and hanging that node too. But things that are running will stay running there. I'm doing a C-Power -- system just to see.
No, I'm toast. I'm off the network.
And I seem to have lost my database server in George - admin.
I can't even get back into the VPN server.
I had to restart my MySQL daemon on George - admin. But what you're going through is something else with the firewall.
Yeah, I just lost the network completely, so.
And C-Power -- system is showing R1I0N0 power is on but not booted. And again, not booted means that the SSH daemon is not replying. But we are still getting a heartbeat from it. We did have a high load level going on. And I'm not seeing any disquoted information going on right now. There may have to be something that's got to be turned on now, something new here. But interestingly enough, my application is still running.
I've had experience that sometimes, I haven't tried with XFS, but I know with EXT3 and Luster, occasionally quotas are not enabled after a boot. It's kind of a bug that loses the quota enabling for system.
Yeah. Control ECF to steal it from the prior person on this node. Again, I'm not getting anything, no console. I can probably still ping it. Now, I cannot ping, I can ping from, but that just says the interface is alive. Application's still okay. Not able to get logged in. Still no output here. So I'm going to do my Control ECL18, and it says log level set to 8. Control ECL1T. Did not work. Control ECL1T, and that time it worked. And again, this is going into var log consoles. And this is similar to what was in the workbook. I basically, everything's waiting on NFS, but because we've hit a quota situation, I'm going to SSH to R1 lead. Oops. So here's my node, I0, N0 that I was doing it on. So I'm going to do XFS underscore quota. And then P1. No. Oh, this is interesting. My blocks are smaller than my limit. Oh, I'm in the wrong image too. I'd written a script to actually go through this project ID by project ID, but let me try quota dash P 64. That's not the one I want. $65. And there we can see, let's see. There I've hit the quota limit. I'm just checking here. There we are starting to see some quota usage data for some reason. Wasn't there before. And it's showing it 100% there for compute-new. But the disk space available is still not showing. I'll have to check to see if there's a bug in there. That's what I was trying to get to. So the hard part now is to find the file. I'm going to go into var lib SGI per host, and then compute-new, and then I0N0. And then we've got an ITSI, a root, and a var. I'm just going to go into root. And there's the file that's causing the problem.
And where are you to find that?
Huh?
Where are you to find that?
I'm on the lead node since the compute node is hung.
Okay.
And knowing approximately which node, I was able to get the project ID. From the project ID, I was able to see that it had hit quotas, confirmed with Ganglia that it had hit quotas. And then on the lead node for that particular node, I went to varlib SGI per host, host name, node name. And then there's an ITSI root and a var. So I'm in on the lead node, varlib SGI per host, compute new, I0N0 root. And that's where the file was that I was creating. Of course, I knew it was going there, so it was a little bit easier for me to find it. Otherwise, you're using something like DU and stuff. And that's not always easy either. If the data's still dirty and flushing, you're not going to see the full size of the file until the flush has occurred. Was there another question?
How fast would find locate that?
Yeah, generally you're looking by space, and find might miss something that's lots of little files in the directory or something like that. I'm normally thinking DU.
Yeah, well, find has an argument to it which sorts by size, so you can
Yeah.
find files exceeding a given size.
But again, that'll catch big files, but not lots of littles.
Ah,
Whereas DU is combining everything in the directory.
okay.
That's the only advantage that I was trying to say. If I have lots of little files that are filling it, it won't show up. Maybe I've got 100 1 gig files or something like that instead of a 100 gig file.
Well, what I've recently noticed is that memlog will fill up the var messages and var log warn files.
And that can hit a quota limit too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is no easy way to know. Again, I was just, I knew where to look. But yeah, varlog messages and stuff too. Right now it's not big at all, but you can get message storms. Let's see.
And the other one is dumps.
Now dumps won't be in the quota though. Unless something's changed. I've checked numerous times, the dumps are not part of the quota. And I'm rebooting the node here and see what it looks like on a reboot. There we go. So here again, we're always going to PXE boot first, but the PXE boot is not acknowledged by any DHCP server, so it should roll over to a disk boot. But in this case, we've got a compute server, so it's always going to PXE boot. It has no disk.
Right, but they're all mounted on the rack leader.
Correct?
And if the rack leader is taking those dumps into varlog dumps, it'll fill up the space and you'll get an error on XFS quotas.
I don't think it'll be an XFS quotas, but the file system fault condition can occur. The dumps aren't under any quota. I'll take a dump and prove that, unless they've changed something. So, root, SGI. On a reboot, the quotas are actually bumped up. That way you can get through the reboot. Again, we're not able to see it here. Let's see. Don't have any of those commands. Oh. Hard to see here. It does warn, and it temporarily increased the quota by 10 meg, so that you can, you know, work with things from there. Okay, so I am on the on the console, so I'm going to do a control ECL18, then control ECL1C, did not take, control ECL1C, that time it took. You're going to need to do it several times before you're comfortable. No pausing. So once this dump is done, we'll go find the dump.
So does that mean I have to engage more than one finger?
No. Control E has to be held down together, but then everything else isn't. Control E are held together, and then it's a C1L8, C1LT. So here it's actually our syncing the dump now. So this is where it's going, var log dumps. So I want to see my application. So I'm able to see a little bit of data there. Looks like I've quit out of my MXP. So there's the dump. Well, the dump's not there yet. Let's wait for it to finish. So there's the dump. XFS_IO on the file, VM core. And then what is it? LS proj. Shows the project ID is 0, which means it does not have any project ID to it, which means it's not part of quotas. Now that doesn't mean that they can't fill up the route, particularly with a multi-slotted route, by the way. So there's about 34 gig here that's still available in my case. But those dumps are not part of the project quota. Anybody think of anything else? Let me see if Gangly was showing anything yet. It is showing the host down here now. Let me go to the rack. We can see the host dropping out here. It's not showing it down right now, but it's in the process of coming back up. What? Gmon-D must be started by now, but I'm a little surprised it came back that quick. But yeah, now it is.
I think there may be a lag time between what you are seeing on...
There is a lag time, yes, but that's what I was trying to do to get fresh data.
I'm not even seeing the ganglia on my WebEx monitor yet. I'm still in the other screen.
I'm just waiting to see that node come back. There, now the node is back up. Control EC dot, and again going to net LS, there's nothing there. Net R1 lead, LS/net. Now it's there, it's auto mounted. People get burned by that. So now I can go into var log consoles. VI and 0. Now it has all this garbage stuff in here. View will get rid of that, but go backspace. There's the boot. I was looking for the traceback that I did. There's the traceback that I did. Anyway, CD into var, no, SSHR1 lead, CD into /var, lib SGI, per-host, compute-new, R1 I0N0, root, and then I'm going to remove big file. XFS_quota. And there my quota is back down to below the limit again, and I'm safe. Let's see if Gangly picked that up yet. So there's my quota limit for compute-new. Hasn't picked up the change yet. Probably waiting for a heartbeat from Gmon-D. I'm still not, it went down just a little bit there, but that was from the reboot where we bumped 10 meg, I think. Anyway, I don't have anything more to really cover live. Wait for that to fix itself. But are there any other questions right now?
Not at the moment.
So let me know if you're going to be, I'm expecting Kevin's going to want to play with his system, but let me know when you're done with your system.
Okay,
And then Sunday I'm going to be making sure I got the proper kernel in place. But today and tomorrow, and I'll be online email today and tomorrow as well. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm done with the class, except for supporting anything you want in a lab situation.
Okay, thank you. I'll play with my cluster and ask questions as needed.
Yep, that's the best thing. Anybody else?
Dave, I definitely got out of the class what I needed to, which is a higher level view of how ICE works.
Yeah.
I'm way behind in my escalation documentation for this week, so I'll try to do a bit more this afternoon, but I have reports.
I appreciate your patience during the week, and you put in extra effort off hours. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much for the class, and again, I really did get what I needed out of it.
So I'm done. I'm hanging up here, and I'll be seeing your email as time goes on. Bye then.
All right, thanks.
All right.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will now end.